How we doing, folks? Your host Moose here, back for our Around the NCAA recap show for Season 1, Week 8 of our Pitt Panthers Dynasty series here. But before we get into the Around the NCAA recap, we do have a recruiting update for you. Obviously, things are coming thick and fast here this season, and the Panthers have now brought in 4 more recruits, bringing their class up to 6. So we're going to bring you information about those guys. The first one they were able to secure the signature of was Ryan Archer, a 3-star fullback out of Mission, Texas. They don't really have anybody backing up George Aston. The redshirt sophomore has been a star for him. So Ryan Archer was the guy they signaled out. They beat out Penn State, in-state rival there, and University of Miami were the 2 top schools he was considering. But he's a decent all-around fullback. Okay, solid blocker, definitely can catch the ball out of the backfield if needed, and he's an okay runner. So really, he ticks all the boxes for a fullback in this Panthers scheme. The second guy they were able to bring in, Leo Franklin, an outside linebacker, 4-star, 23rd ranked outside linebacker in the country. Beat Ole Miss, Auburn, a lot of SEC schools were in for him. Great speed, really good acceleration. He's a solid tackler. Another guy that's just a very all-around good player, okay? He's a good guy in coverage as well, does better in zone coverage, seems to do so, but strong. He's really able to get around the field very easily, and he's a good guy that's going to be able to rush the quarterback as well as drop into coverage if need be. So 4-star for the Panthers, which is huge. Todd Sibley, 3-star running back out of Akron, Ohio. The Panthers beat out the likes of Notre Dame, Ole Miss, Georgia Tech, and Alabama. He's another guy who's just an all-rounder. He's got very good speed, B-rated speed, decent strength, good elusiveness. His juking is all solid. He's very solid all around the board. There's no doubt about that. So he's another guy that could plop right into this Pitt scheme that seems to churn out top running backs. He's a guy that we could look for in the past. He's a 3-star halfback, but I think he's going to play definitely better than that. And this is the gem of the Panthers class so far. 4-star defensive tackle out of, it says halfback there, sorry, because I took the snapshot as I was switching between Toth and Sibley, but he's a 4-star defensive tackle. He's the 3rd best defensive tackle in the country. The Panthers beat out Michigan, and again, in-state rival Penn State. They snapped Toth out from under their nose. This is 79 overalls where he's projected at. We haven't fully scouted him, obviously. We will have that by the end of the season, but great strength to get up and down the field. He's just an absolute monster. He's a really good tackler as well, so he looks to be a fit, especially with the Panthers losing Tyreek Jarrett. Both of their starting defensive tackles are leaving after this season, so he could slot right into the starting lineup. And of course, Pat Narduzzi's got to be happy with these 4 signings, 2 4-stars and 2 3-stars, and he lets out the Pitt is it Pat signal. So that brings the Panthers total up to 6 recruits this season. But moving away from the Panthers now, we're going to take a look around the NCAA and see how things shaped up here in Week 8. Of course, your Pittsburgh Panthers, number 60 in the country, improved to 5-1 with a 28-14 comfortable victory over Virginia Tech. Miami stayed undefeated, going to 7-0 now with a 21-10 victory over North Carolina. Duke 23-17 over Virginia. Georgia Tech 17-10 over Boston College here. Some big ACC battles as conference plays heating up. And Clemson won an absolute barn burner, 34-28, as they traded touchdowns back and forth with Florida State all the way into overtime, where who else but big Heisman contender Deshaun Watson with a touchdown run to seal it for Clemson after they had stopped Florida State on defense. So an unbelievable contest there. Some other big games around the country. Tennessee falls again, this time to South Carolina, 31-17. Baylor wins, Florida wins, Ohio State obliterates Rutgers to stay undefeated, as does Wisconsin and Michigan. So some Big Ten blowouts this week. Alabama stays unbeaten. LSU fights off Ole Miss with a late touchdown interception, return 48 yards for a touchdown to give LSU a tight 35-31 victory. Houston stays undefeated. Utah with a big win over Arizona. Navy remains undefeated, beating Temple. Penn State escapes a tight matchup with Maryland as the Terps tried to come from behind, but Penn State held on for a 35-29 victory. Oklahoma stays undefeated. UCLA with a 31-9 win over Stanford, who's really falling in the rankings. And then, of course, your big victory there was Clemson, Florida State. Washington State upsets number 19 Oregon with a 38-24 win, so Mike Leach's men come out with a win there. And Washington just keeps blowing people out, 41-3 over Fraud Graham and Arizona State. So big win for the Huskies. Players of the week following this week, JT Barrett putting up a 350-yard, 5 combined touchdown performance, and Kenny Keys with 2 forced fumbles and a pick, as well as 3 tackles for a loss in a victory for UNLV. Vontae Maddox is the first Panther to actually win Player of the Week with 2 picks in the win against Virginia Tech. Deshaun Watson with an unbelievable almost 400-yard, 4-touchdown performance in the win against Florida State wins Offensive Player of the Week. And it's ironic because those two will be facing off coming up this week. But speaking of Deshaun Watson, he leads our Heisman watch right now. He's been unbelievable this season. Greg Ward is nipping at his heels, though, as he leads Houston to a still unbeaten record. Joe Mixon drops down in the rankings in spite of a decent performance against Kansas. JT Barrett's up after that big win against Rutgers. And Francois, in kind of a not great performance in the loss to Clemson, drops down to 5th. So year of the quarterback yet again in our Heisman watch. There's no doubt about that. Following this week, though, how does the ACC shape out? Miami still undefeated, 3-0 in conference, is the team to beat. But your Pitt Panthers, with their only loss against a team not in their division, they could knock off Miami if possible. But otherwise, it's a kind of subpar Coastal Division, whereas Clemson is just obliterating everyone in their path in the Atlantic Division. It looks to be their division to lose, but they still do have the likes of Louisville and Wake Forest to play against this year. So following those matchups last week, how does the top 25 poll shake out in college football right now? So we take a look here. The coaches poll says Bama number 1. The media poll, Clemson jumps back up to number 1 after that huge win against Florida State. So they jump ahead of Alabama. And the BCS, we will get to it, but the first BCS poll has come out this season. But if we take a look at the coaches poll, Bama number 1, Clemson 2, Oklahoma 3, Washington 4, Miami 5, Ohio State and Houston, Wisconsin, as well as Navy, who you see a little bit further down the rankings, but they're all undefeateds right now. So for the BCS, they're hoping, I would think, for a few teams to kind of fall just to help that shake out a little bit better. Your Pitt Panthers jump up to 15th after their win over Virginia Tech, so 1 spot up, sitting just a spot behind rivals Florida State, and Penn State's up to number 20. Another big team that the Panthers were able to beat. You can see in the rankings, Oregon and Ole Miss dropped out this week. But the big thing everyone wants to see is going to be the BCS rankings, because that's going to determine who is in the national title game. Of course, Alabama and Clemson right now would be facing off if the BCS championship were to be played today. Oklahoma and Washington just behind Miami. Pretty much 1 or 2 undefeateds from every conference, you have to say, are scoped up in the top 10 there. So your Pitt Panthers, again, sitting down in 15th, just like their ranking in the coaches poll, with a .904 rating in the BCS. But of course, they do take on Clemson this week, so we could see them joining the movers and shakers depending on how this week pans out. But that's your BCS rankings right now. Alabama and Clemson, the cream of the crop. And if we look at the big games this week, an undefeated takes on Penn State. Ohio State has to go into Happy Valley at Beaver Stadium and try and come away. And Kirk Herbstreit's actually picking the Nittany Lions to knock off the Buckeyes and take them, going against his alma mater and expecting Penn State to knock Ohio State from the ranks of the unbeatens. Another big Big Ten matchup. Wisconsin 6-0 heads to the Big House to take on Michigan, who's 5-1 and looking to resurrect their national title hopes. But Herbstreit picks Wisconsin. Paul Chryst, former Pitt coach, so a lot of Pitt connections here in this episode. Herbstreit picks Wisconsin to go in and come away unscathed and remain unbeaten. Additionally, Texas, number 11, has to take on number 24 TCU. Herbstreit's picking TCU in that battle. Tennessee taking on Alabama, as Bama looks to remain undefeated. Tennessee is on an absolute losing skid, so Herbstreit is going to pick Bama. And arguably your game of the week, definitely in the ACC, one of the major games of the week, your Pitt Panthers taking on the Clemson Tigers. They're fresh off a huge victory against Florida State. That might be something that kind of weighs on their mind. The Panthers have a couple of prospects visiting as well, so they want to put on a good show for their prospective recruits coming in. It's a number 7 versus number 9 scoring offenses in the country. The Panthers the best rush defense, but Clemson with a phenomenal pass defense. So hopefully that means the Panthers rushing attack will be able to take advantage of Clemson here, although that number 9 passing offense could do a number on one of the worst passing defenses in the country. And Herbstreit is picking Clemson, you saw there. So, your Panthers are going to have a tough one out for them. Clemson's coming off a big win over Florida State, though maybe they spent all their energy last week and they won't be as mentally prepared this week for the Panthers. That's surely what Pat Narduzzi's hoping for, even though he won't be preaching that to his team. But if we look, Deshaun Watson, a 21-2 touchdown to interception ratio right now, which is unbelievable. Wayne Gallman, very dangerous, ton of speed from him. He's got 82 yards a game on the ground, so we know he's going to be dangerous there. And of course, their big receiver is Mike Williams, 5 touchdowns on the season as Deshaun Watson's favorite target. And he's the guy we're all watching out for. He's a dual threat quarterback. He's run for 318 yards and 6 touchdowns as well. He's averaging almost 50 yards a game on the ground, in addition to the almost 300 yards he's racking up passing. So Deshaun Watson's going to be the main weapon here for Clemson. That's who the Panthers are going to have to key in on, but it's so tough. Artavis Scott, Mike Williams, Hunter Renfrow, Deion Kane, 4 fantastic receivers that Watson's going to be able to throw to, as well as, All-American tight end Jordan Leggett. So there's 5 different receiving options, not to mention, the halfback coming out of the backfield as well, or Watson running himself. So there's so many ways that this Clemson offense can attack the Panthers defense. Really, the 2 main things I think they're going to have to do is they're going to have to contain the run game, force Clemson to beat them through the air, and then they're just going to have to hope they can get pressure on Watson with 4-man rushes so that they can drop 7 guys into coverage, try and clog up different areas of the field and force Deshaun Watson into some bad throws and things of that nature. But then on the Clemson defensive side, a couple of good corners. They got Ben Boulware. Their defensive line is what could really hurt the Panthers, but the Panthers' big strength is their offensive line. So hopefully if the likes of various players can hold off that attack, it'll be good for the Panthers, but we're not predicting that to happen. We do see Clemson coming in with a 41-28 victory at Heinz Field over your Panthers. Obviously, the home crowd, surely it'll be a sellout with the number 2 team in the country coming to Heinz Field. That could be a big advantage for the Panthers, so if they do pull off the upset, that's something we could attest it to, being at home, obviously not having to go into Death Valley. But we see Clemson remaining undefeated. Let us know who you think is going to come away with the victory, what you think of the Panthers' new recruits that they're able to bring in, what you think of these episodes as a whole. As always, guys, all feedback, constructive or in support, is always appreciated. And as always, we will see you in the next episode. Take care. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye. And as always, hail to Pitt.